What is up, guys? So I have got a Banlist Discussion video for you here today, but first I just want to say thank you to everyone. I recently hit 50 subscribers. I'm just so grateful. I mean, it's just lovely really to see that number. I remember when it hit, I was so excited. I ran out, told my wife, oh my gosh, I just hit 50 subscribers. Just much love to all of you. Thank you for all supporting my channel, and I'm going to keep on releasing that content for you. I really do enjoy doing this. And as you can see, I did start a new series recently, Repairing the Rogue. Definitely go take a look at that. That is going to be a series. I probably will do it kind of once a fortnight, once a month, because it does require a lot of work going into it. And yeah, as I said before, I'm also going to carry on doing more of these discussion videos because quite a few people did like the last one that I did. But yeah, so the ban list, well, we're in a bit of an awkward position. So we know that Konami is unlikely to make massive changes to the ban list just based on what happened with the June 15th ban list, where they essentially touched 3 cards. I think it was Multi-Faker, Ulti Cannon Hawk and Necros. Those are the only 3 decks that were touched, and it was all unlimiting things. It was no actual bans. So well, for one, I'm one of those people who, while I do understand Konami's reason for not necessarily banning cards that haven't seen real life play, I don't necessarily agree with it. I think especially in formats like this where you have certain decks that are just so dominant, I think it's a bit risky, and you can push people away from the game, because if you're a person who's trying to become competitive and actually spend money in the game, this is one of the worst formats to come into, because it basically means unless you buy one of 2 very expensive decks, you don't have a huge chance of competing. Yes, we have seen 1 or 2 people online top with other decks, but by and large it's because online there's no budget, so they were able to splash infinite amount of monies on counters or play strategies that work in a scenario where no one has any idea of what's happening. Like Mystic Mine, if you ever try to play Mystic Mine at actual locals, you'll quickly find that after maybe 1 or 2 rounds, everyone knows you're the Mystic Mine guy and starts playing against you. It sounds silly, but even something like that I think is relevant as to why you won't often see the Mystic Mine burn player when at locals, because everyone knows there's a Mystic Mine burn player, so everyone starts bringing in sides and stuff to it. But moving on from that, yeah, so I do think Konami should make some changes to the ban list, but they won't. But I'm still going to discuss what I want and what I think should be banned. So starting off, Firebrack and Ling. So those 2 cards, they're both really bad cards for the meta. They're probably part of the biggest problem. I mean, it's just so much advantage. Firebrack on its own, tutoring a card from deck is insane. OCG has this limited, whereas Ling, they have that ban. Ling summoning several tokens. I mean, it's just too much versatility, and then when you combine that with the ability to use Auroradon as well and stuff like that, just to tutor more cards from the deck, I mean, it's just silly. The synchron combos don't come up. So in my opinion, I actually think Firebrack should be banned and Ling should be left alone. Ling is a good card as well, but I think it's always stuff that tutors cards from the deck tends to be the bigger problem, and tends to be where more of the issues started. And maybe correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I remember OP Firebrack's combos from when it came out ages ago. Ling I only really started seeing OP combos when it actually was released. People weren't, it wasn't a massive issue for me. So I really do think that the problem card is Firebrack, and taking that down to 0 and just ignoring Ling. I also think as well, especially with extra deck cards like that, it's a waste of time taking them down to 1, because you're very rarely going to be playing them at more than 1. And so when you take cards like that down to 1, a lot of the time it makes very little difference. There are exceptions. I think Dragoon of Red Eyes is a good example, where OCG taking it down to 1, I think, actually does hurt the deck, because you were having people basing decks just around that card, which is so aggressive. So by taking it down to 1, you can't really make a deck just around that card, because as soon as we've outed it once, it's gone. So I do think in that scenario it's useful, but I think for start and extender cards like these, just get rid of 1. So yeah, as I said, Firebrack to 0, Ling that can stay for now. But moving on, Adamantipator. So Adamantipator at the moment is a bit ridiculous, and it comes through a few things. So I'd say the first issue with them is obviously Firebrack and Ling. So I think if one of those cards go, specifically Firebrack, I'd say it would help reduce the deck a bit, but I'd say the deck would still be insanely powerful. And a big part of that is because it has 3 very good starter cards that can all potentially special summon themselves for free, and they're all easily searchable. And then on top of that, you have Block Dragon. So here are 2 things. Firstly, I think Block Dragon should go. The card's just not fair. It's a Dragon Ruler. The ability to keep special summon itself from the graveyard is very OP, and especially in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, where it's so easy to fill your graveyard up with cards. It's just not fair, and that effect on its own is amazing. Like, to keep special summoning itself for basically free out of your graveyard, but then on top of that, the ability to search a bunch of cards as well. I mean, it's nuts. That's one of the frustrating things about Emancipator, because you break their board and then they just do it. I mean, yeah, the extra deck is gone, but you break their board and then they can just recur all their resources back, and it's always difficult to deal with decks that do that. And Block Dragon has been busted for a while. It's just not been noticeable. I remember when Burning Abyss was using it before, it was just as good then. It's just that you didn't really see many people playing Burning Abyss. That's why no one really noticed how busted it was. But I think some people probably did realize it was busted. But yeah, I definitely think Block Dragon is just not a very healthy card. And Emancipator, I feel like, is its final nail in the coffin that really is said, you know what, this card needs to go. Let's have a different gatekeeper for a while. And then Emancipator itself, I think the level 2 starters, I can't remember what they're called. I think it's the ones that's not called Analyst. I think it's like Researcher or something else. I'll have it on the screen, but I think one of those should go to 1. It would be nice. Just give them a few less starters. It's not amazing how they have in their deck. They can play 9 starters, 6 of them which are going to special summon themselves for free, almost guaranteed. So I think by taking one of those down to 1, even to 0 potentially, just to slow down the deck a bit, would be great. An alternative could be actually to take them all down to 2 or take them all down to 1. I wouldn't even think that's too unfair for the deck, though I think it would be a bit unfair to do that to a really new deck. So maybe take one of them down to 1 or 0 just to slow down the deck a bit. I think that would be another nice little tap on the wrist. I don't think any of their synchros or anything like that needs to be banned. I don't think any of their other cards needs to be banned, because the deck by itself isn't amazingly busted. It's just a very, very consistent starting deck and a very resilient deck, and then it makes a crazy board because of things like Block Dragon and things like Firebracks and stuff. But yeah, so Emancipator having Block Dragon banned and having one of their starters go down to 1 or 0. Moving on, Eldritch. So Eldritch is a weird one. Now, I think Eldritch is also busted, but I think Eldritch escapes notice, similar to how a deck like Sky Striker it was the strongest deck for a long time, but it was like not overtly strong. But then one of the signs, in my opinion, of a deck being very powerful is when it becomes splashable and everything. So Shadow's had this issue ages ago, where it's just like you can start playing this deck you have so many different variants. So you can play Eldritch with Numeron, you can play an Eldritch Synchron variant, you can play an Eldritch Zombie variant, and they're all quite good. And there's lots of different things that I think contribute to it. I think the deck in itself is just a very, very well designed deck. I would actually say this, by the way, while Eldritch I think is an unfair deck, I think it's less unfair than Emancipator, but I do think it's unfair. I do think it's incredibly well designed. I like the idea of like this kind of unique control deck. I like the fact that it's a zombie deck as well, and it's not just another dragon deck or another warrior deck or another Cyberse deck that shouldn't be Cyberse. So yeah, I really do like that deck, but I do think it needs hit. But yeah, I think one of the best ways to hit Eldritch as a whole would be to take Scarlet Sanguine down to 1. So the reason why I like this change is because one of the things I found with Eldritch is a lot of the times you try and stop their first Scarlet, and then they just do something else anyway. Maybe they just stop, they just negate that, or maybe they just bring out another one somehow. And I think by denying them the ability to bring out a Golden Lord on your turn, or making it much harder, it gives them a very clear choke point to stop their interaction. Because I also think it weakens the ability to put that in other decks. Because if you look at Eldritch, one of the biggest things, once you remove that Golden Lord from the field, a lot of the times you shut down like 2 or 3 of their back rows. But those back row traps aren't completely useless. They're still bodies. They can still probably stop themselves being OTK'd, and they're still going to gain advantage from it the next turn. It's just that now, for example, they don't get a free pop on top of all of that. So I think allowing you to do that, allowing you to interrupt them in that way, it's a really, really effective way of slowing down the deck without killing the core strategy. It also makes it a lot less valuable, you're less likely to splash in another deck for 3 interruptions when it's so easy to stop that. Where all I need is 1 card to get rid of the first Golden Lord, and it's not bad. Another idea, obviously, is to hit Golden Lord himself, but I think it's better to keep him so the deck itself is still very good. And if you're focusing on him specifically in your deck and you're playing the white Eldritch, for example, it's great. But slow down the red one. We don't like special summon in the deck. I think limiting the amount of times decks can special summon from the deck. Lol, that's funny. I feel like I said deck 14 times in the last like 10 seconds or whatever. But limiting the amount of times that happens is definitely a good way to balance decks, in my opinion. I think it would really help make Eldritch a lot less of a problem. But yeah, so moving on. I think there's 2 cards in the format that need to be banned, just because they're both not fair cards. One of them is True King of all Calamities, and one of them is Utopic Zexal. So, Calamities, the problem with Calamities is that by itself it's not busted. It isn't a particularly amazing effect. Sorry, not amazing, but it isn't a particularly fair effect. But it's not too easy to summon for most decks most of the time. How Firebrack and Ling Cross are big parts of the problems. Before that, it was only really Dinos that could summon it out that easily. And then maybe now Generators as well, Generators. But I do still think it should go to 0 just to discourage that kind of card design. It's not nice. Cards that say you can't play the game, they need to have a lot of commitment. So Rongo Miniad, I think, is a good example of, before Rongo Miniad was busted anyway, and it was broken by cards just spamming out all the cards. I think that was a good example of a card that should have that effect, where it's like you need to have like 5 cards on the field. So it's like if you've committed your entire board to this card, then yes, it's not too bad. But when 2 cards are getting you that plus 4 draws, I mean, it's just stupid. And that's why I think Calamity should go. Same way as Zexal. I think when 1 card can get you the Zexal, it's just not fair. It's frustrating when every deck has to play 3 in perm. And that's the thing, just because it's counterable doesn't mean it's fair. I think the problem is, it's more that even though it's counterable, but I have to play 3 droplets in the side, 3 in perm in the main, just to deal with it, or 3 gamma or whatever. And I think that's not right. I think that should definitely stop. So yeah, I definitely think that Zexal and Calamity should both go to 0. Just because it's boring. It's boring. Let new mon players play like a go second very effective OTK strategy. Don't give them the ability to go first and just do that to you for no reason. I don't think that's right. But lastly, and this one I definitely think is going to be a bit controversial, but I do think it needs a hit, is Invoked. I think Invoked has needed a hit for a while, and as I'm saying this, I'm looking at my Invoked call that I have no intention of selling, and I'm feeling like I should hold my tongue, but whatever. I think Invocation should go to 1. I thought Invoked needed a hit for a long time, and I've kind of not been sure exactly where it should be hit, but I think this is probably the best. Now, I don't normally like taking cards, like doing that to certain cards, but I think Invocation is unique, and so here's my rationale behind why it should go to 1. Firstly, even if Invocation went to 0, the deck wouldn't be completely dead. It would kill part of the mechanic in terms of recycling the Alistairs, but you can just use double fusion spells. You can use things like King of the Swamp. But the reason why I want it at 0 is so that loop is still possible, but it means that they have to rely on something else. Invoked players now might have to actually play things like Polymerization, which adds a kind of a layer of inconsistency to the deck, which I do think it does need. Because you have to remember, Invocation, again, is similar to Eldritch, similar to the Firebrack combat, where it's a combat that does give you a lot of resources with just 1 starter. And also, you have to remember as well, Magistus is coming out soon, which is definitely going to be a huge boon to the deck as well. So yeah, I do think Invoked needs to be hit. I think Invocation to 1 would be a great hit to slow that deck down. Now, in terms of cards that I think need to come off the list, or need to at least be a little less banned, maybe go from the limited to semi-limited, I can think of 2 personally. So, the first card I think is either Performer Power Skullcrabat Joker, that name, my gosh, or Astrograph Sorcerer. So Pendulum Magicians aren't in an amazing spot right now. They took a lot of kind of side hits. They took no hits to the actual deck, I think, but they took a lot of side hits that has really slowed it down and pushed out of the format. And the only Pendulum deck you really see is Endymion. Now, obviously, I do remember Pendulums being busted. I do think that it's good they've lost a lot of cards, but I think the loss of Firebrack, the loss of Destrudo, combined with the change in Marshall 5 where they're still limited and no one else is, I think it would be nice to give them either Astrograph or Skullcrabat, just to add another kind of layer of consistency and power to the deck to make the engine worth playing. I think especially now that they've got Revolution Dragon as well, there are some kind of cool things they can do, and I think it's nice to have a different kind of going first deck. We have been in this kind of weird combo-esque, crazy combo-esque / control format, and it feels weird to me to not have Pendulums be one of those decks, which, yeah, I feel like it deserves to be there. So one of those cards to one, I think, would be fair, just as a little test to see how that goes. Then, moving on, the next deck, which I do think does deserve to have a card unbanned, is going to be Spellbooks, and it's going to be Spellbook of Judgment. I definitely think that card should come back to 1. So, I mean, that card was amazing before. It's basically what Multi-Roll wants to be honest. They're different cards, but I'd say they play in a kind of similar way in terms of what they do with your resources. But Spellbooks by themselves aren't an amazingly busted deck anymore. And I really think it would be nice to give that deck a chance to come back into limelight, just because it's such a cool archetype. They've got a lot of cool cards, and their interruption isn't amazingly busted. I think even having Spellbook of Judgment at 3 wouldn't make the deck busted, but I think at least at 1 would be fair, because they can recycle cards so easily as well. It means that once they do get access to it, they can keep using it. But yeah, I really think Spellbook of Judgment back to 1 would be a nice little test for the format as well. It feels like I'm favouring Magicians a lot, but I'm not. It just so happens that it's 2 Spellcaster decks that I do think deserve to have cards on. There is one other card, but I don't know, I might talk about it in another Banlist video later on. But yeah, I definitely think Spellbook of Judgment back to 1 would be nice to give Spellbooks a chance to compete in the format again and just have a different kind of deck. We have control decks, but I want a different kind of control deck like Spellbooks again in the format. So guys, that is my Banlist discussion video. If you've enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe to my channel for more content, and I'll talk to you all soon. Peace.